Everything seemed ordinary until the cameras caught something extraordinary. It was Tuesday, March 14th, and the Family Feud studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Golden lights cascaded down from the ceiling, illuminating the iconic blue and red podiums. The familiar Family Feud logo glowed in brilliant gold letters against the deep blue backdrop. Audience members filled the tiered seating, their excited chatter creating a warm hum throughout the studio. Steve Harvey adjusted his charcoal gray suit jacket and straightened his patterned tie as he reviewed his cards one final time. After 14 years of hosting, he could read a room instantly, and today felt electric. The Rodriguez family from San Antonio, Texas, stood at the red podium, their energy infectious. Maria Rodriguez, 45, a high school counselor with kind eyes and a warm smile, stood next to her husband, Carlos, 47, a soft-spoken mechanic whose calloused hands revealed years of honest work. Their daughter, Sophia, 19, home from her first year at UT Austin, practically bounced with excitement. Her younger brother, Diego, 16, tried to play it cool despite his obvious nervousness. But it was the smallest member of their family who had captured the attention of everyone in the studio, though for reasons no one yet understood. Timothy Rodriguez, 12 years old, with short dark brown hair and light tan skin, sat in his modern wheelchair positioned slightly behind the family podium. He wore a red hoodie, blue jeans, and white sneakers that would never touch the ground in the way other children's shoes did. Timothy had been born with spina bifida, but anyone who knew him would tell you that his wheelchair was just something he used to get around, like some people used cars or bicycles. It never defined him, never slowed him down, and certainly never dimmed the brightness in his dark eyes. Today, however, something was different about Timothy. While his family chatted nervously about strategy and laughed at Steve's warm-up jokes, Timothy sat quietly, his small hands clutched around something in his lap. A piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times it had become soft as fabric, with worn edges and creases that spoke of constant handling. The opposing Wilson family from Detroit took their positions at the blue podium. Steve Harvey strutted to center stage with his signature confidence, his voice booming across the studio. We got a good one today, folks. The Rodriguez family from San Antonio, Texas, taking on the Wilson family from the Motor City. The audience erupted in cheers. Steve worked the crowd with practiced ease, but as he turned toward the Rodriguez family to begin his traditional family introductions, something made him pause. It was subtle, barely noticeable to the casual observer, but Steve Harvey had developed an instinct for reading people that went far beyond entertainment. Timothy wasn't looking at Steve, wasn't looking at the cameras, wasn't even looking at his excited family. Instead, he was staring down at that piece of paper in his hands, his young face carrying an expression far too serious for a 12-year-old boy on what should have been one of the most exciting days of his life.
Let's meet the Rodriguez family,
Steve announced, walking over to their podium. Maria, tell me about this beautiful family of yours. Maria beamed as she introduced each family member. Well, Steve, this is my husband Carlos. He keeps everyone's cars running in San Antonio. This is our daughter Sophia. She's studying to be a teacher. And our son Diego here is a sophomore and already talking about following in his dad's footsteps. She paused, her voice growing softer and filled with unmistakable pride. And this is our youngest, Timothy. He's 12, he's in 7th grade, and he's honestly the smartest one in the family. Steve walked over to Timothy's wheelchair, crouching down to get on his eye level the way he always did with younger contestants. Timothy, man, how you feeling about being on Family Feud today? Timothy looked up, and for a moment, his face lit up with the kind of pure joy you'd expect from a child living out a dream. It's amazing, Mr. Harvey. I can't believe we're really here. You nervous? Steve asked with a grin. A little, Timothy admitted, but then his gaze drifted back down to the paper in his hands, and that serious expression returned. Steve noticed the shift immediately. He glanced at the paper, then back at Timothy's face. Something was happening here, something beyond the usual pre-show jitters, but the show had to go on, so Steve stood up, ruffled Timothy's hair gently, and moved on to introduce the Wilson family. The first round began with the classic energy of Family Feud. Steve announced the category. We asked 100 people, name something you might find in a teacher's desk drawer. The families buzzed in, gave their answers, and the game flowed with its familiar rhythm. The Rodriguez family took control and found 4 answers on the board, building an early lead. During the commercial break, Timothy's behavior grew more noticeable. While his family celebrated their strong start and the Wilson family strategized for their comeback, Timothy remained fixated on his piece of paper. He would unfold it carefully, read something, then fold it back up. His lips moved slightly as if he was rehearsing words in his head. Sophia noticed first. She walked over to her little brother during the break. "You okay, Timmy? You seem quiet." Timothy nodded quickly, tucking the paper into his hoodie pocket. "I'm fine, just thinking." But he wasn't fine. Everyone who knew Timothy could see that. This was a kid who normally filled every room with questions, jokes, and observations about everything around him. Timothy Rodriguez was curious about the world in the way that made adults remember why they loved talking to children. Today, however, he was somewhere else entirely. The second round began, and the Rodriguez family extended their lead. Steve was in his element, delivering his signature reactions to unexpected answers and keeping the energy high. But between questions, his gaze kept drifting back to Timothy. Something about that boy was tugging at his attention in a way he couldn't shake. It was during the third round that everything changed. The category was announced. We asked 100 people, name something that makes you feel brave. Carlos Rodriguez buzzed in for his family. "Facing your fears," he answered confidently. "Good answer," Steve exclaimed. And indeed, it was the #1 response on the board. The Rodriguez family chose to play, and the questions came quickly. Maria answered, "Having people who believe in you for another top answer." Sophia said, "Standing up for what's right," and found the #3 spot. Diego managed, "Helping someone else" for the 4th answer on the board. Now it was Timothy's turn. Steve walked over to the wheelchair, microphone in hand, ready for what he assumed would be another solid answer from this bright young man. "All right, Timothy, we need one more good answer to clear this board. Name something that makes you feel brave." Timothy looked up at Steve, and in that moment, something shifted in his expression. Without a word, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper. His hands were trembling slightly as he held it. "Mr. Harvey," Timothy said, his voice quiet but clear, "can I tell you about my best friend Marcus?" The studio audience was still energized from the previous answers, but Steve heard something in Timothy's voice that made him focus completely on the boy in front of him. "Of course, Timothy. Tell me about Marcus." Timothy unfolded the paper carefully, smoothing out the creases with the kind of reverence usually reserved for precious artifacts. "Marcus was my best friend since 2nd grade. He lived next door to us, and he had the same thing I have, spina bifida. We did everything together." Steve's entertainment instincts told him to keep the show moving, to handle this touching moment quickly and get back to the game. But something deeper, something human, told him to listen, really listen. "Marcus sounds like a good friend," Steve said gently. "He was the best friend." Timothy's voice was growing stronger, more confident. "Last year, Marcus got really sick. Not because of his spina bifida, but because he got leukemia. He had to go to the hospital for treatments, and I visited him every day after school." The studio was beginning to quiet down as people sensed that something significant was happening on stage. Even the Wilson family had stepped closer, drawn in by Timothy's story. "We used to watch Family Feud together in his hospital room," Timothy continued. "It was our favorite show. Marcus always said he wanted to meet you, Mr. Harvey. He said you were the funniest person on TV, but also the kindest." Steve felt his throat tighten. He could sense where this story was heading, and every paternal instinct in his body was awakening. "Timothy, is Marcus okay?" Timothy looked down at the paper in his hands, took a deep breath, and when he looked back up, there were tears in his eyes. "Marcus died 3 months ago, Mr. Harvey, right before Christmas." The words hit the studio like a physical force. You could hear the collective intake of breath from the audience. Sophia covered her mouth with her hands. Maria's eyes immediately filled with tears. Even members of the Wilson family were visibly moved. But Steve Harvey, who had handled thousands of emotional moments over his decades in television, found himself in completely uncharted territory. This wasn't just sad, it was Here was a 12-year-old boy carrying his grief onto a game show stage and doing it with a courage that left Steve speechless. Before Marcus died, Timothy continued, his voice now steady despite his tears. He wrote me this letter. He made me promise not to read it until we got on Family Feud. He said if we ever made it on the show, I should give it to you. Timothy held out the worn piece of paper towards Steve. He wanted you to read it. Steve Harvey had been in television for over 3 decades. He had interviewed celebrities, politicians, and people from every walk of life. He had handled moments of joy, tragedy, surprise, and everything in between. But standing there, looking at a 12-year-old boy holding out a letter from his deceased best friend, Steve felt something he had never experienced in all his years of entertainment. This moment was bigger than television. Steve took the letter from Timothy's hands. The paper was soft from being folded and refolded, and he could see that it had been written in the careful handwriting of a child who wanted to make sure every word was clear. Timothy, Steve said, his voice now stripped of all performance, all entertainment value. Do you want me to read this out loud? Timothy nodded. Marcus wanted everyone to hear it. He said it was important. Steve unfolded the letter carefully. The studio was now completely silent. Even the producers in the control booth had stopped giving directions. 200 people held their breath as Steve Harvey prepared to read words written by a child who knew he was dying. Steve cleared his throat and began to read. Dear Mr. Harvey, my name is Marcus Chen, and I'm Timothy's best friend. If you're reading this, it means Timothy made it onto Family Feud, and also that I'm probably watching from heaven. Steve's voice caught slightly, but he continued, I want you to know that Timothy is the bravest person I ever met. When I got sick, he never treated me different. When I was scared about the treatments, he would sit with me and make jokes until I felt better. When I couldn't go to school anymore, he brought me homework and told me about everything that happened each day. The audience was completely silent now. Several people in the front row were openly crying. The last time we watched your show together, Timothy told me that if he ever got on Family Feud, he would be too scared to talk to you. I told him that was silly because you're nice to everyone. But then I realized something, Mr. Harvey. Timothy isn't scared of talking to you. He's scared of being sad on TV because he doesn't want people to feel sorry for him. Steve paused, looking down at Timothy, who was wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his red hoodie. So I want to tell you something about my best friend, Timothy Rodriguez. When the doctors told me I was going to die, Timothy didn't cry in front of me, not once. He stayed strong so I could be strong. When I was too weak to lift my arms, Timothy would help me eat my lunch. When my mom and dad were too sad to smile, Timothy would tell jokes until they laughed. Steve's own voice was becoming thick with emotion, but he pressed on. Mr. Harvey, the reason Timothy makes me feel brave isn't because he's not scared of things. It's because he chooses to be brave anyway. He taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. Being brave means you do the right thing even when you are afraid. The letter continued, and Steve read every word. So when Timothy tells you what makes him feel brave, I hope you know that he makes other people feel brave too. He made me feel brave enough to face being sick. He made my parents feel brave enough to let me go when it was time. And someday, he's going to make lots of other people feel brave too. Steve paused, gathering himself before reading the final lines. Please tell Timothy that his best friend Marcus says thank you for teaching him how to be brave. And please tell him that being on Family Feud is awesome, but having him as a best friend was the most awesome thing that ever happened to me. P.S. I hope you win all the money. Love, Marcus Chen, age 12, Timothy's best friend forever. When Steve finished reading, the silence in the studio was profound. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of something much deeper. It was the sound of 200 people having their hearts touched simultaneously. Steve folded the letter carefully and walked back to Timothy. Without a word, he handed the letter back to the boy, then did something that defied every rule of television production he had ever learned. Steve Harvey knelt down in front of Timothy's wheelchair. took both of the boy's hands in his and spoke directly to him, forgetting entirely that cameras were rolling and that millions of people would eventually see this moment. "Timothy," Steve said, his voice barely above a whisper, but clearly picked up by his wireless microphone. "Your friend Marcus was right about everything, about you being brave, about you helping other people be brave, and about you being awesome." Timothy nodded, tears streaming down his face, but also smiling for the first time since the show had started. "But I want to tell you something that Marcus didn't get to say in his letter," Steve continued. "You being here today, sharing his words with all of us, that's not just brave, that's the kind of love that changes the world." Steve stood up and turned to face the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been hosting this show for 14 years, and I've met a lot of families, heard a lot of stories, but today Timothy Rodriguez and his best friend Marcus have reminded us what this show is really about. It's not about the money, it's not about winning or losing. It's about families, it's about love, and it's about the courage it takes to keep going when life gets hard." The audience erupted in applause, but it wasn't the prompted, energetic clapping of a game show audience. This was something deeper, more respectful. It was the sound of people acknowledging that they had witnessed something sacred. But Steve wasn't finished. "Timothy," he said, walking back to the boy's wheelchair, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. What would Marcus want you to do right now?" Timothy thought for a moment, wiping his eyes. "He'd want me to answer your question. He'd want me to tell you what makes me feel brave." "All right then," Steve said, holding up his microphone. "Timothy Rodriguez, what makes you feel brave?" Timothy looked up at Steve with clear eyes and a steady voice, remembering that my best friend Marcus believed in me. Even when he was dying, he spent time writing me a letter to help me be brave. So when I'm scared, I remember that someone loved me enough to use some of his last days making sure I would be okay. The answer wasn't on the board. It couldn't be because it was too specific, too personal, too real for a survey of 100 random people. But Steve Harvey turned to the board anyway and called out, "Show me remembering that my best friend believed in me." Nothing happened, of course. The board couldn't register an answer that had never been surveyed, but then something unprecedented occurred in the history of Family Feud. Steve Harvey walked over to the answer board, picked up one of the markers used for writing in answers during sudden death rounds, and wrote, "Marcus's love" in big, clear letters across the number 5 spot. "Survey says," Steve announced, his voice carrying across the studio, "that's worth 100 points. Because some answers are worth more than any game can measure." The studio exploded. The Rodriguez family gathered around Timothy, the Wilson family crossed the stage to join them, and even the production crew could be seen wiping their eyes behind the cameras. But the most powerful moment came when Steve walked back to Timothy one final time. "Timothy, can I ask you to do me a favor?" Steve said. "Of course, Mr. Harvey. Next time you miss Marcus, next time you're feeling sad about losing him, I want you to remember something. You came on national television today and shared his story with millions of people. You made sure that Marcus Chin, your best friend, will be remembered not just by you and your family, but by everyone who sees this show." Steve paused, choosing his words carefully. "Son, you didn't just answer a question today. You honored your friend's memory in a way that would make him proud, and you reminded all of us what real courage looks like." The Rodriguez family ended up winning the game, though by that point, winning and losing had become secondary to everything that had transpired. During the final moments of the show, as the credits prepared to roll, Steve made one last gesture that would be talked about for years to come. "Before we say goodbye," Steve announced to the studio audience, "I want everyone here to do something with me. Timothy, can you roll your chair right here next to me?" Timothy positioned his wheelchair next to Steve at center stage. Marcus Chin was 12 years old when he died, and he spent some of his final days writing a letter to help his best friend be brave. I think that deserves some recognition. Steve turned to face the studio audience. "Everyone, please stand up and join me in a moment of silence for Marcus Chin, a boy who understood that real friendship means helping someone be brave even when you can't be brave for yourself." The entire studio rose as one. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of respect, memory, and the kind of love that Marcus had written about in his letter. When the moment ended and the audience sat back down, Steve made one final announcement. Timothy Rodriguez, you and your family are going home with your winnings today, but you're also going home with something much more valuable. You're going home knowing that you kept a promise to your best friend and that you helped all of us remember what really matters. As the show wrapped up and the families began to leave the stage, Timothy carefully folded Marcus's letter and put it back in his pocket. But now, instead of the heavy sadness he had carried all day, there was something lighter in his expression. Peace made, with the satisfaction of knowing that he had done something important. Steve Harvey watched the Rodriguez family walk off stage, Timothy's wheelchair moving smoothly beside his parents and siblings. In 40 years of television, Steve had learned that some moments transcend entertainment, that some stories are bigger than the shows that contain them. Today, a 12-year-old boy had reminded everyone in that studio that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms. It becomes courage. It becomes the strength to honor someone's memory by living the way they believed you could live. The cameras stopped rolling, the lights dimmed, and the studio began to empty. But the impact of Timothy's letter, Marcus's love, and the reminder that bravery is a choice would linger long after the last audience member had gone home. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in television aren't scripted, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep a promise to a friend who believed in you, even when they're no longer there to see you keep it. Timothy Rodriguez had done exactly that, and in doing so, he had shown an entire studio, and eventually millions of viewers, what real courage looks like when it's wrapped in love, friendship, and the determination to honor the people who shaped us into who we're meant to become. The letter from Marcus had indeed made Timothy feel brave. But more than that, Timothy's courage in sharing that letter had made everyone else feel brave too, just like Marcus had predicted it would.